Captain Foster watched the surviving Zephyrian ships retreat toward the edge of the solar system and made a decision that would echo throughout galactic history. Instead of pursuing the broken enemy fleet, he ordered the human ships to allow their escape. The battered alien vessels limped away carrying news that would shake the foundations of an empire that had never known defeat. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true extent of human victory. 37 Zephyrian ships had been destroyed or crippled beyond repair. Only 13 vessels remained capable of faster-than-light travel. The mighty cosmic supremacy drifted as a powerless hulk that would eventually be recovered by human salvage teams. Battle Commander Vexilon himself was among the survivors rescued from escape pods. Human losses were remarkably light, considering they had faced what the galaxy considered an invincible fleet. 2 destroyers had sustained heavy damage but remained operational. 1 heavy cruiser needed major repairs to its engine systems. Most importantly, no human ship had been lost completely. The Zephyrian energy weapons had proven largely ineffective against human armor and defensive systems. Lieutenant Amy Walsh aboard the Retribution established communication with the retreating alien ships. Her message was broadcast on all frequencies to ensure every surviving Zephyrian heard it clearly. The word she transmitted would soon spread throughout the Empire and beyond to every species that had trembled before Zephyrian power. The human message was simple, but profound. Earth had not sought conflict with the Zephyrian Empire. Humanity desired peaceful relations with all intelligent species in the galaxy. But humans would never accept slavery or domination by any power regardless of their technological advantages. Any attempt to conquer human worlds would meet the same fate as the fleet that had just been destroyed. Within days, news of the catastrophic defeat reached the Zephyrian capital world. Emperor Zalthek had been preparing victory celebrations based on intelligence reports that described humans as primitive creatures with obsolete technology. Instead, his military advisors brought him recordings of the battle that seemed impossible to believe. The Emperor watched the tactical displays that showed Zephyrian ships being torn apart by weapons that should not have existed. The elegant vessels that had conquered 1,000 worlds were reduced to debris by crude metal projectiles fired from ugly human ships. Most disturbing was the realization that the primitive-looking human fleet had been holding back advanced capabilities during first contact. Military analysts worked frantically to understand how the humans had achieved such devastating results. The kinetic weapons they used violated everything the Empire knew about effective space combat. Energy shields were designed to deflect plasma beams and particle weapons. They provided no protection against solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. Even more puzzling was human ship design. The vessels looked primitive and inefficient, but they had absorbed direct hits from weapons that should have vaporized them instantly. Intelligence officers realized that the ugly exterior plating concealed armor, materials, and defensive systems beyond Zephyrian. Understanding Emperor Zalthek convened emergency sessions with his most trusted advisors. For the first time in 2 millennia, the Empire faced an opponent that could not be conquered through technological superiority. The humans had demonstrated the ability to destroy Zephyrian fleets, despite appearing to be backwards primitives. This changed everything about the galaxy's balance of power. News of human victory spread throughout Zephyrian space with unprecedented speed. Subject species that had served the Empire for centuries began questioning whether their masters were truly invincible. The Altarian Republic secretly contacted Earth through diplomatic channels. The Nexus Collective sent covert intelligence operatives to observe human technology firsthand. Dr. Karen Hughes led humanity's first diplomatic mission to the galactic community. Her team included former military officers like Colonel Pete Wilson and intelligence specialist Commander Julie Adams. They established contact with dozens of species that had been waiting for someone capable of challenging Zephyrian dominance. The diplomatic revelations were as significant as the military victory. Humans discovered that their approach to technology development was unique in known space. Other species pursued efficiency and elegance in their designs. They created weapons and ships that performed specific functions with minimal waste. Human engineers took a completely different approach. Human technology emphasized redundancy and adaptability over efficiency. Every critical system had backup components that could function independently. Damage control procedures allowed ships to continue fighting even when half their systems were destroyed. Most importantly, human weapons were designed to overcome any possible defense rather than simply being more advanced versions of existing technology. The mass driver weapons that had devastated the Zephyrian fleet represented centuries of human military thinking. Instead of trying to build better energy weapons, human scientists had perfected kinetic systems that could not be stopped by conventional defenses. The tungsten projectiles were immune to energy shields because they were physical objects rather than energy beams. Human ship armor used similar innovative thinking. Instead of trying to deflect incoming weapons, the armor was designed to absorb and distribute damage across the entire hull structure. Neutronium plating could withstand direct hits from planet-killing weapons while maintaining structural integrity. Energy weapons that had conquered the galaxy were nearly useless against human defensive systems. 6 months after the battle, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar naval base. The facility orbited a strategic asteroid beyond the orbit of Mars. From this position, human ships could intercept any threat approaching Earth, while also projecting power throughout the solar system. The construction of the base represented humanity's emergence as a major galactic power. Trade delegations from dozens of species visited Earth regularly to establish diplomatic and commercial relationships. Former Zephyrian client states openly defied their masters while seeking human protection. The empire that had ruled unchallenged for 2,000 years was crumbling. Emperor Zalthek made the most difficult decision of his reign. Rather than risk another military defeat, the empire would seek peaceful accommodation with the humans. Diplomatic envoys were dispatched to Earth carrying proposals for mutual non-aggression treaties. The Zephyrians, who had once demanded human submission, now begged for human restraint. The galactic community watched these developments with amazement and hope. For the first time in millennia, the established order was changing. A species that had appeared from nowhere was reshaping the balance of power through superior tactics and innovative technology. The humans had proven that advancement meant more than just having the newest weapons. Captain Foster, now promoted to admiral, addressed the United Nations Assembly on the first anniversary of the battle. His speech was broadcast throughout human space and intercepted by intelligence services across the galaxy. The words he spoke became the foundation of human foreign policy for generations to come. Humanity had not sought to become a galactic power, but circumstances had forced that role upon them. Earth would use its influence to promote freedom and self-determination for all intelligent species. The age of empires built on conquest and domination was ending. A new era of cooperation and mutual respect was beginning. The Zephyrians, who had once laughed at human ships and human courage, now studied human tactics with desperate intensity. Their military academies taught courses on asymmetric warfare and unconventional strategy. The species that had once considered themselves the pinnacle of evolution were learning from the primitives they had tried to enslave. In the depths of space, new human colonies sprouted on worlds that had been abandoned by fleeing Zephyrian administrators. Human merchant ships carried trade goods and ideas to species that had never dared to dream of independence. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the most dangerous opponents were those who refused to play by established rules. The laughter that had echoed through Zephyrian space when they first encountered humanity had faded into silence. The empire that had mocked human technology and human determination was discovering that innovation and courage could overcome any advantage. The primitives who had been offered the choice between slavery and destruction had chosen a third option that no one had considered possible. They had chosen to. When Emperor Zalthek sat in his crystal palace and read intelligence reports about human activities throughout the galaxy, every day brought news of former Zephyrian territories declaring independence under human protection. The empire was shrinking rapidly as subject species realized their masters were no longer invincible. The emperor had ruled for over 8 centuries and had never faced a crisis like this one. The humans had not simply defeated a Zephyrian fleet, they had shattered the myth of Zephyrian invincibility that held the empire together. Fear of superior technology had kept 1,000 species in line for 2 millennia. That fear was gone. On Earth, President Brooks signed the Galactic Freedom Charter that formally established humanity's commitment to protecting the independence of all intelligent species. Battle Commander Vexilon stood in the command center of the dreadnought Cosmic Supremacy, and reviewed the fleet manifest with satisfaction. 50 Zephyrian warships surrounded his flagship as they approached the primitive human star system. The force included 10 heavy cruisers, 20 destroyers, and 19 support vessels along with his massive dreadnought. By Empire standards, this was barely a patrol force. The cosmic supremacy was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Its crystalline hull gleamed with energy fields that could deflect most known weapons. The ship's main cannon could punch through the armor of any vessel in the galaxy. Vexilon had commanded this ship for over a century and had never faced an enemy that could seriously threaten it. The other ships in his fleet were equally impressive. Each Zephyrian vessel was a masterpiece of engineering that combined advanced technology with elegant design. Their hulls were smooth and curved to channel energy efficiently. Their weapons systems used focused plasma beams that could slice through metal like cutting tools. Most importantly, their defensive shields had never been penetrated by primitive kinetic weapons. Vexilon found the assignment almost insulting. The Empire was sending him to collect a species that still used metal ships and chemical propulsion. Intelligence reports indicated that humans had finally developed faster-than-light travel, but their technology was centuries behind Zephyrian standards. This would be less of a battle than a demonstration of superior civilization. The battle commander had read every report about the human encounter 3 weeks earlier. Admiral Kekstar described humans as typical primitives who were amazed by basic Zephyrian technology. Their ship looked like something a child might build from scrap metal. Their weapons appeared to be simple projectile systems that fired solid objects at low velocities. What amused Vexilon most was human confidence. Intelligence intercepts suggested that the primitives were actually planning to resist the Empire's generous offer. The idea that creatures who had barely learned to travel between stars might fight the Zephyrian military was simply ridiculous. Every species in the galaxy knew that resistance to the Empire was futile. The fleet's approach to the human system was deliberately slow and visible. Vexilon wanted the humans to see the overwhelming force coming toward them. Fear would make them more likely to surrender peacefully. The battle commander preferred conquest without bloodshed, because it was more efficient and left useful infrastructure intact. As they entered the outer regions of the human star system, Zephyrian sensors detected the locations of human colonies and space stations. The third planet from the star appeared to be their homeworld with billions of inhabitants. Several other worlds showed signs of human settlement, but nothing that suggested advanced military installations. Most interesting were the human ships detected throughout the system. Intelligence had estimated that humans possessed fewer than 50 interstellar vessels. Instead, Zephyrian sensors found over 200 ships of various sizes. The primitives had apparently been busy building more vessels during the past 3 weeks. Vexilon was not concerned by the larger human fleet. Numbers meant nothing when facing superior technology. A single Zephyrian heavy cruiser could destroy dozens of primitive ships without sustaining significant damage. The humans were probably hoping that quantity would somehow overcome quality. The Zephyrian formation continued toward the human homeworld with perfect precision. Each ship maintained exact distance and heading relative to the others. This kind of coordination was possible because Zephyrian vessels shared a collective consciousness network that allowed instant communication without radio signals. Human ships probably still relied on primitive electromagnetic transmissions that could be intercepted or jammed. Communications. Officer Talvin reported that human ships were broadcasting messages on multiple frequencies. The translation system converted their primitive language into proper Zephyrian. Most of the messages appeared to be coordination signals between different human vessels. The humans were apparently trying to organize some kind of defensive formation. Battle Commander Vexilon ordered his fleet to take standard conquest positions. The dreadnought would approach the human homeworld directly, while smaller ships surrounded the planet to prevent escape. Any human vessels that tried to interfere would be disabled with minimal force to preserve them as examples of primitive technology. The cosmic supremacy activated its main display screens to broadcast surrender demands throughout the human system. Vexilon's message was simple and clear. The Zephyrian Empire had arrived to accept humanity's submission. All human ships should power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance would only result in unnecessary destruction. Instead of the expected surrender, something unexpected happened. The human fleet began moving toward the Zephyrian formation rather than away from it. Over 100 human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the system and converged on the approaching Empire force. The primitives were actually planning to fight. Vexolan felt a moment of confusion followed by amusement. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Their metal ships looked even more primitive when seen against the elegant curves of Zephyrian vessels. The human fleet appeared to be a collection of flying scrapyards that somehow managed to achieve faster-than-light travel. The human flagship was particularly amusing. Intelligence reports had described it as crude, but seeing it directly was even more entertaining. The ship looked like a metal cylinder covered with armor plates and weapon mounts. Pipes and cables were visible on the outside hull. The entire vessel appeared to have been assembled by someone who had never seen a proper starship. Tactical Officer Cordon provided analysis of human ship capabilities. Their vessels appeared to use fusion reactors for power, which limited their energy output significantly. Their weapons seemed to be magnetic acceleration systems that fired solid projectiles. Most importantly, they showed no evidence of energy shields or advanced defensive systems. The human ships approached in loose formation that violated every principle of proper space combat. Their vessels moved independently rather than in coordination. Some ships accelerated ahead of others while different groups approached from multiple directions. The humans clearly had no understanding of military science. Vexolan decided to make the battle educational as well as decisive. He would demonstrate proper combat techniques while destroying the human fleet. The recordings would be useful for training purposes when other primitive species needed to understand the futility of resisting the Empire. The battle commander opened a communication channel to the human flagship. He wanted to give the primitive commander one final chance to surrender before the demonstration began. The human response would probably be some combination of defiance and pleading that would amuse the Zephyrian officers. The human commander who appeared on the communication screen looked exactly like the intelligence reports described. He was a small creature with pale skin and dark hair who wore a simple military uniform. His expression showed determination rather than fear, which suggested that humans did not fully understand their situation. Captain Foster spoke directly to Vexolan across the communication link. His words were translated into Zephyrian by the computer systems. The human's message was brief and completely unexpected. He warned the Empire fleet to reverse course and leave the system immediately. He claimed this was their only warning. The Zephyrian bridge crew erupted in laughter at the human's audacity. A primitive commander was threatening the mighty Zephyrian Empire with consequences if they did not retreat. The idea that creatures who built ships from scrap metal could threaten the most advanced military in the galaxy was absolutely hilarious. Vexolan shared the human message with the entire fleet. Within minutes, every Zephyrian ship was broadcasting laughter across all communication frequencies. Officers made jokes about human bravery and placed bets on how quickly the primitive fleet would be destroyed. Some suggested keeping the human flagship intact as a museum piece. The battle commander decided to respond to human arrogance with overwhelming force. He would destroy the human flagship first, to demonstrate the power gap between their civilizations. The main cannon of the cosmic supremacy would vaporize the primitive vessel in a single shot. The other human ships would probably surrender immediately when they saw their leader destroyed. Vexolan gave the order to charge weapons and target the human flagship. Plasma conduits throughout the dreadnought began glowing as energy built up in the main cannon. The weapon would fire a concentrated beam of stellar plasma that could penetrate any known armor. The primitive human ship would be destroyed so completely that nothing recognizable would remain. The human fleet continued approaching despite the obvious targeting systems aimed at their flagship. Either they did not understand what was about to happen, or they were too primitive to detect Zephyrian weapon signatures. Vexolan almost felt sorry for creatures who were about to die because of their own ignorance. The targeting system indicated optimal range for maximum destructive effect. The human flagship was positioned perfectly for complete annihilation. Battle Commander Vexolan gave the order to fire, and the Cosmic Supremacy's main cannon unleashed a stream of plasma that could melt through planetary crust. The brilliant beam of energy crossed the distance between the fleets in seconds and struck the human flagship directly. Zephyrian officers expected to see the primitive vessel vaporized instantly by the overwhelming power of their weapon. Instead, the human ship continued moving forward with only superficial damage to its hull plating. Scorch marks appeared where the plasma beam hit, but the vessel's structure remained intact. The primitive ship had somehow survived a direct hit from the most powerful weapon in the Zephyrian fleet. Tactical Officer Cordon checked his instruments twice before reporting that the targeting systems had functioned perfectly. The plasma beam had struck the human flagship exactly where intended. The energy output had been sufficient to destroy any known type of armor. Yet the primitive vessel showed only minor hull damage and continued operating normally. Vexolan ordered a second volley from the entire fleet. 20 Zephyrian ships fired their plasma weapons simultaneously at the approaching human vessels. Brilliant beams of energy lanced across space toward targets that should have been reduced to vapor. Again, the results were impossible to understand. The human ships absorbed the plasma strikes with minimal damage. Their hulls glowed red-hot where the energy beams hit, but the vessels maintained course and speed. Whatever armor the primitives used was far more effective than Zephyrian intelligence had predicted. The humans had clearly been hiding their true capabilities. Captain Foster's voice echoed across all communication frequencies as he responded to the Zephyrian attack. His words were calm and controlled despite having just survived weapons fire that should have killed everyone aboard his ship. The human commander gave his fleet a simple order that chilled every Zephyrian officer who heard it. All human ships opened fire simultaneously. But instead of energy weapons, they launched solid projectiles at velocities that Zephyrian sensors could barely track. Tungsten carbide slugs weighing several tons streaked across space at speeds approaching 10% of light velocity. The projectiles moved so fast that they appeared as brief flashes on Zephyrian detection systems. The first impacts occurred before Zephyrian crews could react. 3 heavy cruisers took direct hits from the kinetic projectiles, and the results were catastrophic. The solid slugs punched through energy shields as if they did not exist. The projectiles penetrated Zephyrian hull plating and continued through the ship's internal structures before exploding out the opposite sides. Crystalline armor that had never been breached by any known weapon shattered like glass under the kinetic impacts. Emergency systems throughout the damaged ship screamed warnings as atmosphere vented into space through massive hull fractures. The elegant Zephyrian vessels that had seemed invincible minutes earlier were now crippled and dying. Commander Linda Gray aboard the UES Thunderbolt demonstrated the tactical innovation that human officers had developed during their years of training. Her ship began spinning while firing its mass drivers. The rotation created a pattern of projectiles that overwhelmed Zephyrian point defense systems. Other human commanders adopted similar unpredictable maneuvers that made their ships nearly impossible to target accurately. The Zephyrian formation fell apart as captains tried to respond to an attack unlike anything in their military manuals. Energy weapons required precise targeting to be effective, but the human ships refused to fly in predictable patterns. Some vessels accelerated directly towards Zephyrian ships, while others approached from unexpected angles. Battle Commander Vexolan watched his tactical display with growing horror as more Zephyrian ships took critical damage. The primitives were using weapons that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of elegant energy beams that could be deflected by proper shields, they fired crude metal objects that smashed through anything in their path. The human projectiles were not just powerful, but also numerous. Each human ship seemed to carry hundreds of the kinetic rounds. They fired continuously without apparent concern for ammunition supplies. The space around the Zephyrian fleet filled with deadly metal, slugs moving at incredible speeds. Zephyrian ships tried to use their superior speed to escape the barrage, but the human projectiles were too fast to avoid. The primitives had somehow developed targeting systems that could predict ship movements and place rounds exactly where enemy vessels would be. Evasive maneuvers that should have provided safety only resulted in impacts at different angles. The Cosmic Supremacy attempted to use its massive size and armor to overwhelm the human flagship. Vexolan ordered his ship to charge directly toward the primitive vessel, while firing all weapons. The Dreadnought's plasma cannons created a continuous stream of energy that should have melted through any armor ever created. Captain Foster responded by doing something that defied all military logic. Instead of retreating from the massive enemy ship, he ordered the Retribution to accelerate directly toward the Dreadnought. The human flagship increased speed until it was racing toward a head-on collision with a vessel 10 times its size. Zephyrian officers assumed they were witnessing a desperate ramming attack. The primitive commander had apparently decided to sacrifice his ship and crew to damage the Empire's flagship. Such tactics were barbaric but occasionally effective against superior opponents. Vexilon prepared to destroy the approaching human ship before it could complete its suicide mission. But the human commander had no intention of ramming the Zephyrian dreadnought. When the Retribution reached point-blank range, it launched its entire payload of penetrator rounds directly into the enemy ship's hull. The specialized ammunition was designed to punch through the heaviest armor before detonating inside the target. Dozens of kinetic projectiles struck the cosmic supremacy simultaneously. The rounds penetrated the crystalline armor and detonated deep within the ship's structure. Secondary explosions rippled through the dreadnought as fuel lines ruptured and power conduits overloaded. Most critically, the exotic matter reactor that powered the ship began losing containment. Vexilon felt his flagship shuddering under the impacts of weapons that should not have been able to harm it. Damage reports flooded the command center as systems failed throughout the massive vessel. The primitives had somehow developed ammunition that could penetrate armor designed to withstand planet-killing weapons. The exotic matter reactor reached critical instability, and emergency systems automatically ejected the core to prevent total annihilation. The cosmic supremacy lost power and began drifting helplessly through space. The flagship of the Zephyrian invasion force had been crippled by a single volley from a primitive human ship. Throughout the fleet, Zephyrian commanders watched their elegant vessels being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had underestimated completely. The humans fought with a savagery and effectiveness that violated every assumption about primitive species. Their crude-looking ships carried weapons more powerful than anything the Empire had encountered. More disturbing was human tactical doctrine. The primitives did not fight according to established patterns that civilized species used. They attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. They used unpredictable movements that made targeting difficult. Most shocking was their apparent willingness to risk their ships in close-range combat where mutual destruction was possible. The surviving Zephyrian ships tried to retreat but found that human vessels were faster than expected. The primitive ships that had looked slow and clumsy proved capable of matching Zephyrian acceleration. Human commanders pursued fleeing Empire vessels and continued firing their kinetic weapons at targets trying to escape. Communications. Officer Talvin aboard one of the damaged cruisers sent desperate messages requesting reinforcements. His ship had lost main power and life support was failing. The hull had been punctured in dozens of places by human projectiles. The crew was abandoning ship in escape pods while the vessel slowly broke apart. Battle Commander Vexilon faced a decision no Zephyrian officer had confronted in over 1,000 years. His fleet was being destroyed by an enemy that should have been helpless against Empire technology. The primitives had weapons and tactics that made Zephyrian advantages meaningless. Continuing the battle would only result in the complete annihilation of his force. The human fleet continued its relentless attack without showing any sign of fatigue or ammunition shortage. Their ships moved through the battle zone like predators hunting wounded prey. Every Zephyrian vessel that slowed down or showed damage became an immediate target for concentrated human fire. Vexilon gave the order that no Zephyrian commander had ever been forced to issue. The surviving ships of his fleet would retreat immediately and return to Empire space. The conquest of humanity was suspended indefinitely. The primitives had proven that they possessed the ability to destroy Zephyrian forces despite their apparent technological inferiority. As the battered remnants of the invasion fleet limped away from the human star system, Vexilon realized that the Empire had made a catastrophic error. The creatures they had dismissed as primitive slaves were actually warriors capable of destroying the galaxy's most advanced military. The emergency session of the Global Defense Council began within hours of Captain Morrison's return to Earth. President Helen Brooks sat at the head of a long table in the secure conference room beneath the United Nations building. Around her sat the most powerful people on the planet. Defense Secretary Ryan Cole reviewed intelligence reports while Fleet Admiral Patricia Mills studied tactical displays. Chief of Naval Operations Sam Parker examined the technical data that Jake's crew had gathered about Zephyrian ships. The room was silent as everyone absorbed the reality of humanity's situation. First contact with alien life had always been a possibility that governments planned for, but those plans assumed humanity would have time to prepare and choose how to respond. The Zephyrian ultimatum gave them no such luxury. President Brooks spoke first. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the tension beneath her calm words. The choice facing humanity was simple but terrible. They could accept slavery under alien masters or fight a war they seemed certain to lose. No government in human history had ever faced a decision with such enormous consequences. Defense Secretary Cole presented the military analysis. Earth's combined fleets included over 200 warships of various sizes. The largest were heavy cruisers that carried crews of 800 people. The smallest were destroyers with crews of 60. All human warships used the same basic design philosophy as the Defiance. They were built to be tough and reliable rather than fast or elegant. Human weapons technology centered on kinetic systems rather than energy weapons. Railguns accelerated metal projectiles to tremendous speeds using magnetic fields. Missile systems carried nuclear warheads or kinetic penetrators that could destroy targets through pure impact force. Point defense systems used rapid-fire cannons to shoot down incoming missiles and small craft. Admiral Mills explained that human naval doctrine emphasized adaptability and survival. Every ship carried backup systems for critical functions. Damage control teams trained constantly to repair battle damage while under fire. Human crews learned to fight their ships even when half the systems were destroyed. But the technical gap between human and Zephyrian technology appeared enormous. The alien ships moved faster than human vessels and used unknown energy sources. Their weapons were probably more powerful than anything humanity possessed. Most concerning was their apparent ability to coordinate perfectly without visible communication systems. Dr. Karen Hughes entered the conference room carrying a secured briefcase. As head of the Terran Research Division, she knew secrets that even most government officials had never heard. The projects under her supervision had been developing advanced technologies for decades. Some of those projects had produced weapons and defenses that could surprise even an advanced alien empire. Dr. Hughes opened her briefcase and activated a holographic display. The images showed weapons systems that looked nothing like conventional human technology. Antimatter reactors provided power levels that dwarfed fusion systems. Neutronium armor plating could absorb incredible amounts of damage without failing. Most impressive were the mass driver weapons that accelerated projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The mass drivers were humanity's secret advantage. While other species apparently used energy weapons, humans had perfected kinetic systems beyond anything the galaxy had seen. A tungsten projectile moving at 10% of light speed carried more destructive force than most nuclear weapons. The projectiles were impossible to stop with conventional energy shields, because they were solid matter rather than energy beams. Human engineers had also developed stealth technology that made ships difficult to detect. Special hull coatings absorbed sensor beams while internal systems minimized heat signatures. A human ship could approach enemy vessels without being noticed until it was too late for the enemy to react effectively. President Brooks asked the crucial question: could humanity win a war against the Zephyrian Empire? Dr. Hughes was honest in her response. A direct confrontation between the entire human fleet and the entire Zephyrian military would probably end in human defeat. But warfare was not always about having the biggest fleet or the most advanced weapons. The Zephyrians had ruled their empire for 2,000 years without serious opposition. Their military doctrine was probably based on overwhelming technological superiority rather than tactical innovation. They expected enemies to fight according to established patterns that played to Zephyrian strengths. Human military thinking was different. Human commanders trained to fight against superior opponents using unconventional tactics. Every human officer studied historical battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones through superior planning and execution. The principles that allowed ancient generals to win against overwhelming odds could still work in space combat. Admiral Mills presented Operation Ironwall. Every human warship in the solar system would concentrate near Earth. The fleet would include 12 heavy cruisers and 36 destroyers, along with support vessels. Each ship would be upgraded with the latest weapons and defense systems that Dr. Hughes had developed. The flagship UES Retribution would lead the battle group under Captain Danny Foster. Foster was humanity's most experienced combat commander. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and hostile corporations during the water wars. His tactical skills were legendary among human naval officers. Lieutenant Commander Kelly Stone supervised the installation of new weapon systems throughout the fleet. The mass drivers required significant modifications to existing ships. Power systems had to be upgraded to handle the enormous energy requirements. Targeting computers needed programming to track fast-moving targets across interplanetary distances. Each human ship also received improved armor and defensive systems. Neutronium plating was added to critical areas like the bridge and engine compartments. Emergency life support systems were upgraded to keep crews alive even if the main systems failed. Damage control equipment was improved to handle battle damage more effectively. The 30-day deadline gave humanity enough time to prepare, but not enough time to build new ships. The fleet would have to fight with existing vessels that had been modified for combat. This actually worked in humanity's favor, because human ships were already designed to be robust and adaptable. Meanwhile, intelligence teams analyzed every piece of data about Zephyrian technology and tactics. The alien ships appeared to rely heavily on energy shields for protection. Their weapons seemed to be plasma-based systems that fired coherent energy beams. Most importantly, their ship formations suggested they fought in predictable patterns. Human scientists developed countermeasures for Zephyrian technology. The mass driver projectiles would probably penetrate energy shields because the shields were designed to stop energy weapons rather than solid objects. Human ships could also use unpredictable maneuvers to avoid the precise targeting that energy weapons required. President Brooks made the decision that would define humanity's future. The Global Defense Council voted unanimously to reject the Zephyrian ultimatum. Humanity would not kneel to alien masters regardless of the cost. If the Zephyrians wanted to conquer Earth, they would have to fight for it. The decision was kept secret from the general population to prevent panic. Only military personnel and essential government officials knew about the coming war. Preparations continued around the clock as engineers worked to upgrade the fleet, and tacticians planned battle strategies. Commander Rachel Price aboard the destroyer UES Valiant helped coordinate fleet movements. Her ship was one of the fastest in the human navy, and would serve as a scout during the coming battle. She had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments because she believed humanity's freedom was worth any risk. As the deadline approached, human ships took positions throughout the solar system. Some vessels hid behind asteroids or planetary moons. Others maintained patrol routes that would bring them into contact with approaching enemies. The entire fleet was ready to converge on any point where Zephyrian ships appeared. Dr. Hughes made final adjustments to the mass driver targeting systems. The weapons were calibrated to track targets moving at the speed Zephyrian ships had demonstrated. Computer models predicted that human projectiles would reach their targets before the aliens could react and take evasive action. On the last day before the deadline expired, Admiral Mills broadcast a message to every ship in the human fleet. Her words were simple but powerful. Humanity had reached the stars through courage and determination. Those same qualities would see them through the coming battle. The Zephyrians expected humans to surrender without a fight. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain Foster stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched his tactical displays. Hundreds of human ships were positioned throughout the solar system. Each crew was ready to fight and die for their species' freedom. The Zephyrians thought they were coming to collect new slaves. Instead, they would face warriors who refused to be conquered. The countdown timer on the bridge showed less than 6 hours until the 30-day deadline expired. Soon the Zephyrian Empire would discover that humanity was not like the other species they had encountered. Humans did not surrender when faced with superior force. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars through the main window. The ship had been traveling for 3 weeks since leaving Earth's solar system. This was humanity's first journey beyond their home system, using the new faster-than-light drive that scientists had spent 40 years developing. The Defiance was not a beautiful ship by any standard. It looked like a metal cylinder with engines attached to the back and weapons mounted on the sides. Thick armor plates covered every surface and heavy bolts held everything together. Inside the ship, pipes and cables ran along the walls where everyone could see them. The humans had built their first interstellar ship to be strong and reliable rather than pretty. Navigator Lisa Carter checked her instruments at the navigation station. She had been plotting their course through unknown space for days. The ship's computers showed they were now far from any star system that Earth's telescopes had ever studied in detail. Chief Engineer Tony Rodriguez monitored the fusion reactors that powered their ship. The reactors were working perfectly, but they made the ship hot and noisy. Communications officer. Amy Walsh listened to radio signals from space, but had heard nothing except the background noise of the universe. Jake had commanded exploration ships before, but never one that traveled so far from home. Earth's government had chosen him to lead this mission because he was calm under pressure and good at making quick decisions. The crew of 60 people trusted him completely. They all knew they were making history as the first humans to travel between the stars. The mission was simple in theory, but dangerous in practice. Earth wanted to know if other intelligent life existed in the galaxy. If they found friendly aliens, they would make peaceful contact. If they found hostile aliens, they would gather information and return home quickly. Jake hoped they would find friends rather than enemies. 3 days later, Amy's instruments detected something unusual. Radio signals were coming from a nearby star system. The signals were clearly artificial and followed complex patterns that natural phenomena could not create. Someone was broadcasting messages between different locations in that system. Jake ordered the ship to change course toward the signals. The Defiance approached the star system carefully with all sensors active. What they found amazed everyone on board. Dozens of ships moved between the planets. The ships were unlike anything humans had imagined. They were smooth and curved like works of art. They glowed with soft light and moved without visible engines or exhaust. The alien ships soon detected the human vessel approaching. Within hours, 5 of the alien ships changed course to intercept the Defiance. Jake ordered his crew to prepare for first contact with an alien species. Everyone was nervous but excited. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. The alien ships were twice as large as the Defiance and far more advanced in appearance. They moved in perfect formation without any visible communication between them. When they came within range, they surrounded the human ship but did not attack. Instead, they sent a radio message. Amy worked frantically to decode the alien language. The ship's computers compared the message to every human language and mathematical concept in their database. After several hours, they managed to create a basic translation system. The alien message was clear. They wanted to talk. The aliens called themselves the Zephyrian Empire. They had controlled this region of space for over 2,000 years. Their leader introduced himself as Admiral Kextar. His voice sounded like crystal chimes when the translation computer converted it to human speech. Admiral Kextar asked many questions about humanity. He wanted to know where they came from, how many of them existed, and what kind of technology they possessed. Jake answered honestly. He explained that humans came from a planet called Earth. Their species numbered in the billions. Their technology was advancing rapidly, but they were still new to interstellar travel. The Admiral listened to Jake's answers with what sounded like amusement. He asked to see images of human ships and cities. Jake provided pictures of Earth's space stations, the factories that built the Defiance, and the cities where billions of humans lived. The Admiral's response surprised everyone on the human ship. Admiral Kextar laughed. It was not a kind laugh, but the sound someone makes when they see something funny or ridiculous. He explained that the Zephyrian Empire had encountered thousands of species over the millennia. Most of them had technology similar to what humans possessed when the Zephyrians first found them. All of those species had eventually joined the Empire as client races. The Admiral made humanity an offer. The Zephyrian Empire was willing to accept humans as a new client species. Humans would provide raw materials and manual labor for the Empire. In return, the Zephyrians would protect humanity from other hostile species in the galaxy. They would also share some of their advanced technology to help humans develop their worlds more efficiently. Jake asked what would happen if humanity refused this generous offer. Admiral Kextar's tone became serious. Species that refused to join the Empire peacefully were conquered by force. The Zephyrian military had never lost a war. Their technology was so advanced that most species surrendered after seeing a demonstration of Zephyrian power. The Admiral gave humanity 30 days to consider their offer. During that time, Zephyrian ships would monitor the human home system to ensure no hostile actions were taken. Jake was welcome to return to Earth and discuss the proposal with his government. The Admiral was confident that reasonable people would make the right choice. As the Zephyrian ships departed, Jake felt a chill run through his body. The aliens had been polite, but their message was clear. Humanity could join the Empire as servants or be conquered as enemies. There was no third option in the Admiral's mind. Amy intercepted Zephyrian communications as their ships moved away. The translation software revealed that the aliens were making jokes about humans. They called human ships metal boxes and laughed about how primitive human technology appeared. Some Zephyrian officers were already planning how to divide human worlds among themselves. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. During that time, Jake and his crew analyzed everything they had learned about the Zephyrian Empire. The aliens clearly possessed superior technology. Their ships moved faster than human vessels and appeared to use unknown energy sources. Their weapons and defenses were probably far more advanced than anything humanity possessed. But Jake noticed something important about the Zephyrian ships. They were built for efficiency and elegance rather than durability. The hulls were thin and smooth. There was no visible armor or redundant systems. The ship seemed designed for a kind of warfare that relied on superior technology rather than toughness or adaptability. When the Defiance arrived at Earth, Jake immediately contacted the Global Defense Council. His report sent shockwaves through every human government. Humanity had found intelligent life in the galaxy, but those aliens wanted to make humans into slaves. The laughter of the Zephyrian Empire echoed across space as news of the encounter spread through their territory. Every alien species in the Empire heard about the primitive humans who still used metal ships and chemical rockets. Betting pools started on how quickly the humans would surrender once they realized how outmatched they were. None of the Zephyrians suspected that humanity might choose to fight rather than submit. They had never encountered a species that refused their generous offer to become clients. The idea that primitive humans might pose any threat to the mighty Zephyrian Empire was simply ridiculous. Admiral Kextar filed his report and recommended that a small patrol fleet be sent to collect the humans when the 30-day deadline expired. He suggested bringing museum ships to preserve some human vessels as examples of primitive spacecraft design. The conquest of humanity would be so quick and easy that it would hardly be worth recording in the official histories of the Empire.